okay. Yes, yes, yes.
You looked like you were going to gavel in, and I'm like, well, I'm not.
Okay.
Ready when you want.
Okay.
I will call to order this meeting of the Bethlehem City Council Finance Committee. I am Wandalyn Enix, Chair of the Finance Committee. The other committee members are Grace Cramsey Smith and Paige Van Wert. The clerk will please call the roll.
Ms. Cramsey Smith, Dr. Van Wert,
Present.
and Dr. Enix.
Present. Other council members present this meeting is Hillary Kwiatek. Okay, there are 7 agenda items for tonight's meeting. The first agenda item is to review a proposed adjustment to the general fund budget. The second agenda item is to review a proposed adjustment to the general fund budget. The third agenda item is to review a proposed adjustment to the non-utility capital improvement fund budget. The fourth agenda item is to review a proposed adjustment to the water capital fund budget. The fifth agenda item is to review a proposed adjustment to the sewer capital fund budget. The sixth agenda item is to review a proposed adjustment to the CDBG home budget. And the seventh agenda item is to review a proposed adjustment to the stormwater fund budget. If you started this meeting after 6 p.m., please make sure to scroll ahead so that the YouTube stream is current rather than a recording of an earlier portion of the meeting. Is there anyone from the public who would like to speak on any of the agenda items tonight with a 5-minute time limit? All right. The first agenda item is to review a proposed adjustment to the general fund budget. I don't know what that noise is. I will call on the representative from the administration to discuss the request.
A representative from the Health Department will speak on the request.
Hi, Sherry Pancition from the Health Department. We are requesting to create a new account in the name of the Healthy Homes Contractor Training in the amount of $33,700 for funding received for a new Healthy Homes grant to conduct lead abatement training and licensure for contractors. Our second item is to increase the expenditure account for the maternal and child health by $7,600 to purchase supplies for our Partners for a Healthy Baby program. Our third agenda item is to request to open a new account for injury prevention in the amount of $196,296 to reflect receipt for funding for a violence and injury prevention grant. And our last agenda item is to request to create a new account in the name of emergency housing for $12,000 to reflect receipt for funding, and it's actually from the Two Rivers Health and Wellness Foundation Non-Violence and Injury Prevention Grant, to provide emergency housing for those who have high lead in their homes and we need to remove them from their home immediately. That's it.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the administration who would like to speak to this?
No.
No. Do the committee members have any questions or comments? Yes.
Just quickly, the one grant's quite big, so I just wanted to have an idea of what this $200,000 is going to be spent on for the violence and injury prevention. Like, what? Can you just give me a flavor
Sure.
of what that's for?
It's actually the grant. The total amount of the grant is actually $726,000 over 3 years. The $200,000 would be reflective of what we think we are going to be spending in 2023. It is to do neighborhood level assessments. The whole purpose of the grant is for safe passages to school, but we'll be doing neighborhood level assessments in high crime, low poverty high crime, high poverty, low poverty areas in the city. There's 5 census tracts where we'll be focusing on to do like a mini needs assessment, and we'll be mitigating any issues in that area. So we'll be looking at lead and healthy homes. We'll be looking at medical needs. We'll be looking at connecting them with mental health needs. We'll be looking at traffic injury, crossing the street, safe passages to school, and whatever the needs may be, like reducing crime as well.
So does it have like a pediatric focus to it?
The main focus is having children travel to and from school safely.
Okay. And is there a way for people who are in those census zones to understand and be able to communicate with the city what they are experiencing well?
Yes, we plan to go and do a needs assessment, focus groups in those areas for the first 3 months of the program, and then create a need for that particular area specific to what the neighborhood needs and wants.
Okay. And I think we got a lot of I haven't had a chance to review it yet, but in the blight survey that was finished in 2018 and this most additional reinvestment fund, they've done a big housing survey and drilled down to the census tract level. So I hope that you guys are able to pull some of that data that they've already done to, illuminate what the problems may be in terms of just the housing stock itself.
Right. We'll be looking at all of the plans that are associated with these areas, and also all of the program areas in the city that would be touch points, and partner with us to look at the neighborhood as a whole and make those changes.
Thank you.
Does anyone else on council have a question? No questions? I will accept the motion and a second to recommend approval of the administration's request and to place the appropriate legislation on tonight's agenda.
So moved.
Moved. The clerk will please call the roll.
Dr. Van Wert
Aye.
and Dr. Enix.
Aye. The appropriate legislation will be placed on tonight's agenda. Okay. The second agenda item is to review a proposed adjustment to the general fund budget. I will call on a representative from the administration to discuss this request.
Tiffany Wismer will take care of this one.
Hello, good evening. We are requesting to amend the budget for the ordinance that goes along with the local economic revitalization, which is also known as LRTA. We have received $200,000 in escrow in accordance with this ordinance, and we are requesting to add an expense and revenue line in the general fund.
Is there anyone else from the administration who would like to speak to this?
No.
No? Okay. How about the committee members? Yes.
So this is going to go into the expense and revenue in the general fund, but which means those dollars can be now spent, correct?
Mhm.
Who decides how that money is going to be spent?
Good evening, Alicia Carner. The ordinance provides us an aeroscope on how the funds can be spent. They can be granted or loaned. If you recall conversation at the time of the ordinance creation, there was some question around how we would do this. And we committed to a number of ways, whether that is through land acquisition, subsidy for affordable housing units, preservation of affordability, rental assistance. And so depending on the need that emerges, it will be in line with the LRTA ordinance that was previously approved by City Council.
Okay. Is there a way that council could receive a report on the expenditure of those funds? Because I think we're very invested in outcomes and want to really understand the city's process for decision-making when it comes to spending the LRTA money.
Sure. There's nothing that I can say to you today is how those funds will be spent. I mean, frankly, we've had them since last year, and probably should have included it in the budget as a normal line item,
Sure.
but wanted to at least get the funds that are sitting in escrow in a position that if an opportunity arises, we are positioned to spend those funds on, appropriately to preserve affordability or create affordable units.
So would you think is rational to do it on a PRN basis or on an occurrence basis and on a quarterly basis? That we
I
could
think there's only $200,000 there currently. So I think as we commit funds or as we invest in a program, we can send a memo, inform council after the fact. I mean, you're not asking, for any kind of other oversight, correct?
No, I just
Okay.
want to, we just
Yeah.
want to know.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure thing.
All right, is there any more comments from the administration?
No.
Okay. Do committee members, do you have a question? All right. I will accept the motion and a second to recommend approval of the administration's request to place this particular item on tonight's agenda.
So moved.
Move second. The clerk will please call the roll.
Dr. Van Wert
Aye.
and Dr. Enix.
Aye. The appropriate legislation will be placed on tonight's council meeting. The third agenda item is to review a proposed adjustment to the non-utility capital improvement fund budget. I will call on a member of the administration.
The police commissioner will speak of this.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
The police department recently received a grant from the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency for gun violence investigation and prosecution. Grant funding will be utilized to reduce violent crimes and better serve the community through expansion addition to the city's pre-existing camera system. The total award amount is $200,000.
Okay, is there anyone else to speak to this particular item?
No.
Okay, do committee members have questions? I have one question, and
Yes, ma'am.
is this, are these cameras on city lights or are they on the persons of the police officers?
So these cameras are either on city-owned poles or they're on pre-existing PPL poles.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know. Any questions from committee? Yes.
Yes, I was just wondering, because it is specifically about gun violence investigation and prosecution, sort of how those cameras at the distance and everything, how they play into gun violence investigations, and whether there are other potential uses for these funds that are not related to cameras, or is this kind of just finding a way to upgrade the cameras with a grant? I'm just curious, because it seems like I could maybe understand body cameras, but when you're talking about cameras that are up on a pole, I'm just wondering how much. It's a lot of money. So,
Yes, ma'am. So we are locked in to certain parameters for this grant. It is one of two grants that Governor Wolf signed a bill back in July 2022 for the law enforcement assistant grant and then the gun violence prosecution grant. And the use of funding is limited to 5 categories, which was available to law enforcement, local law enforcement agencies, and district attorney offices to improve and enhance coordination of federal, state, and local law enforcement investigations and prosecutions of violations of Chapter 18, of Title 18, Chapter 61, and crimes of violence involving firearms, to support personnel costs, including salaries and overtime related to investigations and prosecutions of violations of Title 18, Chapter 61, and crimes of violence involving firearms, with priority given to applications focusing on straw purchases and firearm trafficking, to purchase technology systems, including related hardware and software, to improve investigations and prosecutions or increase clearance rates, including the purchase of gunshot detection technology and other technologies that support firearm violence reduction initiatives, initiatives that support the tracing of firearms used to commit crimes or delinquent acts, and the identification of illegal firearm traffickers, and then any other efforts that aid in the investigation, arrest, and prosecution of a crime involving firearms. To answer the second part of your question, one, we're always looking for deterrence. If a community knows that there are cameras up in a specific location, individuals will not feel comfortable committing crimes of violence with firearms. And this grant was very competitive. One of the ways we were able to obtain grant funding is pulling that data from a report management system of instances where we've investigated crimes of violence with firearms and sending that data to the state, also breaking it down on a map and showing exactly where we have the most calls involving shots fired and crimes of violence involving a firearm. And that is where we would put the upgrades or the new camera equipment. It is in those areas. And hopefully we will be able to improve our clearance rate of firearms investigations. Clearance rate meaning we investigate the crime, we make an arrest, and a successful prosecution.
Okay. Thank you.
Are there any other questions at this point? No. Okay. I will accept the motion and the second to recommend approval of the administration's request and to place the appropriate legislation on tonight's council agenda.
So moved.
Second. The clerk will please call the roll.
Dr. Van Wert
Aye.
and Dr. Enoch.
Aye. The appropriate legislation will be placed on tonight's council agenda.
Thank you.
Okay, the fourth agenda item is to review a proposed adjustment to the Water Capital Fund budget. I will call on a representative from the administration to discuss this particular request.
Ed Bascola, Director of Water and Sewer.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, Water Capital Fund. So every year, when we put the capital budgets together, both water and sewer for that matter, we take a snapshot of the financial position of the fund at the end of the third quarter of every year. So October 1st, we see what the finances look like. That is the budget that is presented to council when it gets approved in December. You fast forward to the end of the year or beginning of the year now, we go back and reconcile all the expenses and financial changes that occurred in the fourth quarter of the prior year so that we true up the actual budget to January 1 of the year. So that's what this reflects. So you will see that overall, the capital fund was reduced by water capital by $1.4 million. That reflects money that was expended in the fourth quarter of 2022. So we're adjusting that accordingly. So our cash position was reduced. The Penvest grant, we started drawing that down for lead services because that project started last year. It's continuing into this year. And the bond redemption and improvement fund, that's the fund controlled by the authority, which is a pot of capital money as well, is being drawn down. And there were the appropriate changes made to specific line items in the budget. Now, there were two projects that you will see that had increases. There are new projects that were created that came to light in the fourth quarter after the budget was approved. One was upgrades to our Southside pump station, which we recognized was going to be needed this year. And the other is the Country Squire well station. That's one of our well systems up in East Allen Township, which needs rehabilitation. So that's where we are with the Water Capital Fund, if there's any questions.
That's very fine, very fine. Is there anyone else from the administration who may have comments?
No.
No. Okay, do the committee members have comments on this?
Just, I want to understand always. So, in terms of the Country Squire well station, we as the city own these wells in a private place in West Allen Township?
They're not private, they're community, they're called community wells, they're
Okay.
public.
Okay.
So the city owns and operates them.
Okay.
You know, we purchased the East Allen Township Municipal Authority about 10 years ago.
Oh,
There were now 3 community well, they serve little pocket residential developments of maybe 50, 60 homes, but they are publicly run well systems.
I guess my concern always is that the farther out we go, which I know this is a service that we provide, the more expensive it gets. And because there are rural places with, these are wells, that's different from service lines and all that. But it just seems it's quite an expensive thing to service small communities that require constant upgrades in townships that are not ours. So I guess that's just the philosophy of the authority is just.
That's a correct
How we want it.
observation. The per capita cost to provide water to a resident in East Allen Township is greater than the per capita cost to a citizen in the city of Bethlehem.
Mhm.
I don't have the exact number on
No, I
hand, but
understand.
it is true that it does cost more just because of the nature of the beast that you're dealing
And
with.
can you just give me a paragraph summary? Why did we buy that water authority?
I
That
think
obligates us for ongoing repairs in
the-
perpetuity.
the vision, if you will, was that is where a lot of the development pressures are occurring north of our city. If you think of where a lot of warehouses are going, you travel up Airport Road, Weaversville Road. There's a lot of development pressures, and I think there was an opportunity at the time because East Allen Township wanted to get out of the water business. They wanted to give it to somebody or sell it to somebody. And I think we saw it as an opportunity to take it over with the potential that with future development, we would push our system north. And in fact, we bought 4 well systems. One of them, because of the pressure, the development pressures, one of those systems has now been retired, and those customers are on the city water system. So there was enough construction of water mains. So one of those well systems has now been retired. So that's the long-term goal, is to ultimately build the system out as development pressures move north.
I guess I'm always just thinking about what obligations the city is incurring in buying things. And that speaks to kind of the overall philosophy of the water authority, which we don't have to get into right now. But I think it's always important for us as council people to be looking at the capital obligations that we take on when we buy these, creaky old municipal systems and anything else for that matter. It's like we now are obligated, we own it, we got to fix it, we got to pay for it. And it's just where those places, the per capita cost is so much higher than it is for within the city limits. I just want to make sure that I understand kind of the reasoning behind it. So thank you very much. I
Sure.
appreciate it. That's all I have.
Do any other council members have questions? No. Okay. Is there anyone from the administration who wants to speak to this besides Mr. Bascola?
No.
Okay. I will accept the motion and a second to recommend approval of the administration's request and to place appropriate legislation on tonight's council agenda.
So moved.
Second. The clerk will please call the roll.
Dr. Van Wert
Aye.
and Dr. Enix.
Aye. The appropriate legislation will be placed on tonight's council agenda. Thank you very much. All right, the 5th agenda item is to review a proposed adjustment to the sewer capital fund budget. I will call on a representative from the administration to discuss this request.
Ed Boscola will also handle this one.
Okay.
Same concept with the sewer capital fund as with the water fund. The adjustments reflect the fourth quarter expenditures and trues up the budget to reflect the financial position as of January 1st. A little bit smaller than on the water fund, just because there wasn't a whole lot going on in the sewer fund in the fall. But it does reflect. We did retire finally this 2017 small water and sewer grant. That project was finished at the end of the year. So that's why that went from 250 to 0. So that money was spent, and that was a grant money received from the state.
Okay.
Everything else is some minor adjustments from things that were finished up last year.
Is there anyone else from the administration to speak to this?
No.
Okay. Do committee members have comments or questions about the city council lady? Okay. I will accept the motion and a second to recommend approval of the administration's request and to place appropriate legislation on tonight's council agenda.
So moved.
Second, the clerk will please call the roll.
Dr. Van Wert.
Aye.
And Dr. Enix.
Aye. The appropriate legislation will be placed on tonight's council agenda. Okay, the sixth agenda item is to review a proposed adjustment to the CDBG Home Fund budget. I will call on a representative from the administration to discuss the request.
Tiffany Wismer will discuss this one.
We are requesting an adjustment to the CDBG and home expenditures just to shore up what IDIS is reflecting and what we have in Finance Plus. These are usually year-end adjustments that happen. We came last Finance Committee meeting and we adjusted some of the accounts, and with a second look, a few of them needed to be adjusted more in depth.
Okay, is there anyone else from the administration who will have a comment on this?
No.
Do committee members have comments or questions? How about the city council lady? Just a comment I had, I was noticing down to the penny.
Yes.
Okay. I will accept the motion and a second to recommend approval of the administration's request to place appropriate legislation on tonight's council agenda.
So moved.
Second, the clerk will please call the roll.
Dr. Van Wert.
Aye.
And Dr. Enix.
Aye. The appropriate legislation will be placed on tonight's council agenda. All right. The seventh agenda item is to review a proposed adjustment to the Stormwater Fund budget. I will call on a representative from the administration to discuss this request.
I'll take this one. The East Boulevard Storm Sewer project was completed in 2022, but it has one more bill that's still outstanding. And so the bill is for $6,584. So we're requesting that we increase the revenue line of cash, $6,584, and the expense line, $43203, for the same amount.
Okay. Is there anyone else from the administration who would like to speak to this?
No.
No. Do the committee members have any comments?
Just a quick comment. This is more for the citizens than for anything else. But when we had to enact this fund, it was a difficult time to put another expense on the citizens. I think it's $60 per household, if I'm right. It's okay if you
Okay,
don't
I
know.
can fi- I can find out for you.
I'm totally ambushing
Okay.
you here. But I just wanted to make sure that the citizens were aware that there are procedures in place that you can apply for, I think, cutting it in half with certain income level requirements, correct?
I believe there's something that they
Yeah.
can apply for that
Right.
they'll reassess it or
Yeah.
assist them with
So if there's anyone experiencing financial hardship, I would encourage you to call, would it be through Mr. Alcohol?
It's through that
Through
department.
that department to
public-
call
it's
that
through
city
Public
and-
Works.
and request how to do it. Thank
Yes.
you. That's all I had to say.
Do any council members have questions? Okay. I will accept a motion and a second to recommend approval of the administration's request and to place the appropriate legislation on tonight's council agenda.
So moved.
Second. The clerk will please call the roll.
Dr. Van Wert
Aye.
and Dr. Enix.
Aye. The appropriate legislation will be placed on tonight's council agenda. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.